Clarity by Dragons in Chapter 6 Pattern. So, hey, honestly, now, what do you tell your wife you do when you get home? All while manacled and being manhandled into a waiting police car, the greasy haired man bantered amicably between the two plainclothes officers, who each had a firm grip on his shoulders. Though it was Vale's law to be innocent until proven guilty, the average passerby would have a hard time not condemning him right then and there, with his thick clothes and confident smirk, which clearly stated he was above the law even if he was being lowered into the waiting cop car. Because, I mean, really, Junior's gonna have me out in a day or two. Three tops! Now, he also wasn't doing much to hide his contempt. There was an ironic pleasure behind his eyes, as if he were a masochist enjoying how his arms were being twisted painfully behind him, though he was probably imagining the pleasure he was going to have when the situation was reversed. Although, with the gentle way you're handling a man, I'm beginning to wonder if you two aren't partners. I must say that would make home life rather convenient. The car door slammed shut, cutting off his insults and nearly his nose. The officers couldn't be sure, and frankly, by that point, simply didn't care. Motherfucker! The clean-shaven cop turned around and swore, uncaring for the raised eyebrows and passing mothers who gave him a dirty look. He felt unclean enough as it was. Easy, Gray, his partner assuaged him, yet while keeping his distance, as the younger officer pounded his leg with his fist in frustration. You know that he's just trying to rile you up. No shit, I know that. Attacking anything that got in his way, which was thankfully most likely himself at that point. No doubt the young officer would be feeling it by tomorrow, but it was the frustration he was feeling now that he was trying to beat. It doesn't help that he's fucking right. And so what if he is? Lent credence by the gray flecks in his mustache. Dolokov tried to impart some wisdom on his younger partner. You think that's an easy life when, if he gets out, he'll have to explain to his boss why he got locked up in the first place. And out of the streets, there's us, not to mention other crooks out there for his blood. Joe's probably the only place someone like him can rest easy enough without wondering when he's going to wake up dead. Now that the excitable youth had calmed down, with the air of a mentor he laid a hand on his junior's shoulder and showed that his steeled exterior could still operate gently. I know it sounds fucking trite when you see all your hard work go down the drain, but take it from me, I've been on this beat a long time, and I've seen faces come and go in that back seat, and you know what? I've outlived all of them. I know, Pops, the younger man sighed into his knees. Just got to let it out sometimes, you know? I do, the veteran grunted. And better here than in a courtroom or somewhere where you'd attract grim. With a hearty slap on the back, he nearly knocked the younger police officer over as he turned around and headed for their vehicle. But you call me Pops one more time and you won't be worried about punks nor grim neither, capiche? I ain't your daddy, boy. Geez, you're pretty scary sometimes, old man. You know that? Rubbing the spot on his back, which hurt more than all his blows combined, the younger cop moved to follow his partner with a grin on his face. But his senior didn't rise to the bait a second time, just standing stock still in front of the squad car's rear window with his back turned. Oi, Pierre, sir, what's the matter? Stride quickening upon realizing he couldn't see his boss's reflection in the rear window. Ah, shit, don't tell me he got my spare set of handcuffs keys. I could have sworn I left them in the front glove box. No, kid, that ain't it. At a sigh that betrayed his many years on the job, the senior officer reached forward and opened the door they had just closed on their captive. I made sure to double check you on that. Course don't matter much now. When he did, the small flood of crimson cascaded off the running board and onto the pavement. What the? Time for another lesson, kid. With reluctance, the old man stepped out of the way of the grisly view inside the back seat, whereas they might have been worried about a broken nose and some complaining. Neither of these mattered with the now silent head detached from the crook's body. Sometimes you can do everything right and still end up cleaning up someone else's shit. Clarity. Awakening was a journey. She arrived on a fall breeze and landed upon crisp leaves not yet shed. The salt spray of crashing waves roused her, and the soft earth under her head was the bed on which she lay. She knew this place without even having to open her eyes. She didn't want to open them, have them be there too many times before. She knew the only thing that awaited her was a memory carved in stone and an epitaph that wouldn't fade. But that's not what greeted her when at last she wiped away the dust of sleep. The tombstone of her dead mother was nowhere to be found, only death itself manifested in an endless black expanse that smothered the familiar cliffside and blackened the broken moon, her feet treading on glass that was blood red. Hello? There was her voice, but it was see-through, like her hands and feet. Where was she? What was she? Lost? Dead? Trapped? Searching for words, she wanted to scream, to run. She ran, and she screamed for someone, anyone, anything else in that field of crimson blades. If this was hell, why did it have to be draped in her favorite colors? If it wasn't hell, she wouldn't not have grown tired, sunk to her knees, and crushed the hundreds of blood-red strands beneath her dead weight. Why? Her hands dug deep in the moist soil, exhuming what lay buried there. Why is this happening? Because, soul giving a leap, her body was too tired to follow, and she could only look up at the sound of a voice. At long last, how long had it been? Long enough for her hands to become part of the burgundy muck and grow roots, but she tore them up and surged to her feet with a sudden and insatiable desire to live, not for herself, but for this voice which called her with reason. Because the voice chimed with a death knell. At the same time, her heart stopped. I killed you. The debate was over. This was the underworld, and here was her personal tormentor, staring down at her with that unflinching black mask which seemed to congeal from the background, and sword which smiled a Cheshire grin at her plight. No! She denied with whatever conviction her corpse had left just before that snickering sword reaped her. Not giving up on the precious commodity without a fight, she reached behind her back with unreasonable hope and drew forth Crescent Rose, as surprised as she, her fox masked tormentor was, batted away as she countered with a desperate swing. But he was quick to recover, and she was not. All her movements felt sluggish and weak. Maybe she still had her vaunted speed, but nothing was quicker than death. Nothing was so agonizingly slow as the Kitsune demon toyed with her, snipped at her heavy arms and legs. Eventually, soon, blades clanged silently in that twilight while the wine-colored grass danced to rhythm of the fighters. She blocked another strike, but he was too strong, and her defense would not last. Why? She eked out the question. Another breath, another second. Because, deadlocked and face to face, he told her, but the words died before they could reach. Why? She demanded, contested the foregone conclusion, and pushed against the immeasurable weight. Because! The emotion she wasn't expecting flooded back, but it only fueled her drive. Tell me! Tears crashed as the blades fell against one another, time and time again. This time, this was it. The end. One of them would falter. It had already happened. Crescent rose carved through the black mask and the midnight behind it, and for the first time in what felt like a century, she could see sun at last peeking through that slit she carved. But she couldn't look at it. She couldn't tear herself away from what lay behind the mask. Because the answer escaped through his fingers as he rose, and his hands fell by the wayside. It was nothing. Ruby! Huh? Ruby said, looking around. She was in the train area with other students. None of it had been real. She had been daydreaming about him. Are you okay? The young girl looked over at her sister, who had been the one to pull her away from her daydreaming. or daymare more like. I'm fine, Ruby lied. Just thinking. She smiled before going back to what she was supposed to be doing. Right now, she was supposed to be watching two students spar. Those two students this time around being John Ark and Carden Winchester. Ruby grinned at the combination. Poor John. Ruby liked John. He was fun to talk to. He was always helpful to her in any way he could be. She always had fun, even when they had study sessions over what they learned in the leadership workshop class. All in all, John Ark was a good guy in her opinion. He just really, really sucked when it came to fighting. They had been in Beacon for a few weeks now, and John had yet to win a single fight in combat class, and since he was aiming to be a huntsman and attending the best huntsman school in Vale, well, that was an issue. True enough, Professor Goodwitch was calling the fight, and Carden had indeed beaten his fellow team leader with ease from the looks of their aura levels. The blonde professor was doing the usual by pointing out flaws on both sides and ways that they could improve themselves. John's lecture was noticeably longer than Carden's. With her words of wisdom given, she dismissed the class for lunch, which brought her attention back to Yang, who still had a concerned look on her face. Asked if you were okay, her older sister repeated. Yeah, Ruby reassured, having come to her senses. Just some stuff that's on my mind is all. Yang gave her a grim look as she had a feeling on what the girl was thinking about. It had been a few weeks since the encounter with the assassins in Vale, and they hadn't heard anything about them. It was like they had gone silent completely, but none of them were fooled. For Ruby, the problem with the assassins was their effect. Every time she had been in the city, she could see the looks of frustration the police had, as if they couldn't catch this abstract crook, as if Roman wasn't bad enough, but the civilians were a different story altogether. There was this sense of ease that Ruby couldn't understand. She was sure that they had been murdering people since they had last met. The problem was who they were. It was never put in the news, and the people were way too relaxed for it to be normal. It baffled the young girl, because if the assassins were indeed still killing people, then why was no one on edge about it? Clarity. Thrice nearly being spotted and exposed. An accidental electrical fire caused by tampering with street lights. 5 car traffic accidents resulting from aforementioned actions, and hiding his quirked eyebrow behind the enumerated report in front of him, the stern man could not disguise the curiosity in his voice, and an incident involving a possibly malevolent cat. With all due respect, sir, a single hand gesture from the man quelled the objection that was forthcoming, the petulante lowering his masked face back down so it was level with the tatami mats, losing track of the target, and then losing him be apprehended by the authorities. Letting the tablet fall with a small clatter against his desk, the man brought to bear his arched eyebrow over the 4 black-clad assassins prostrated in front of him. And yet you still somehow completed your mission. His sneer betrayed his next words. Good job, Kasai. I'm glad our decision to return you to the field was not in vain. Bowing his head that inch left between himself and the floor, Kitsune took his odd bit of praise with the barest smidge of humility, aloud. Of course, it would be nice if one of these days your team could complete a mission without such drama. We will endeavor to improve, Kitsune intoned, as if reading off a script plastered to the floor. Perhaps the next mission. Insolent. I hissed under his breath, but the animosity was not hidden from any of the teenagers. Your next mission will not be nearly so easy. It was meant to be an admonishment, a threat, but to the squad captain it was like food, and he swallowed it without complaint. It was another mission, another meal to feed, and the insatiable need inside of him that he couldn't qualify. Fox didn't ask whose pound of flesh it was, didn't think twice before sinking its teeth into the life-giving source. He just chewed through it. Clarity. So there we were, in the middle of the night, Nora began as she started her story. It was high noon yesterday, Ran corrected after taking a sip of his drink. We were surrounded by Earthside. Nora continued using the last word. You said Beowulfs last time. It was an army of them. Army of two. But they were no match, and in the end, Ren and I began building our pancake empire that reigned across Remnant. The hyper girl explained, finishing her story. She keeps waking up in the middle of the night, laughing about world conquest. Ren sighed out, looking at the others. I'm thinking it's time we talk to a therapist. Now, on any other day, Ruby would be completely enwrapped in one of Nora's stories, but her mind was preoccupied at the moment. She was focused on John, her fellow team leader, and her first friend at Beacon had a downtrodden look on his face, and Ruby understood. He tried, truly he did. Ruby had seen him many times in the training area by himself, trying to practice and get better with his sword skills. Ruby wanted to approach him to help, but felt that it wasn't her place. In fact, she knew that there was someone definitely more suited for the job of helping the blonde squire improve, and she was sitting right next to her. John, are you okay? Pyra asked softly. Huh? John asked, focusing back in his surroundings, and saw Pyro and Ruby looking at him with concern. Oh, yeah, he said quickly, trying and failing to put them at ease. Why? It's just that you seem a little not okay, Ruby commented with a shrug of her shoulders. By now, everyone else at the table had turned their attention to the blonde, catching him by surprise. Guys, I'm fine, Johnson hastily. Seriously, look. He held his thumbs up and laughed lightly, though it was clearly forced. He looked around before something caught his attention. Everyone followed his line of sight to see the members of Team Cardinal standing around a girl with brown rabbit ears jutting from her hair as Cardin laughs at her. Skylark stood in front of her, holding up his hands to his head in a mock interpretation of her rabbit ears. John, Cardin's been picking on you since the first week of school, Pyra said, turning away from the scene, as did everyone else, all except Ruby. She watched the team continue to laugh at the girl with enamored eyes. Who? Cardin Winchester? John asked. Nah, he's just like that to mess around. You know, practical jokes, he said, blowing off his partner's statement. He's a bully, Ruby said honestly, her eyes still trained on the scene. Oh, please, John scoffed. Name one time he's bullied me, he challenged. The time he knocked your books out of your hand, Ren said. The time he opened your shield so you couldn't get through the door, we supplied. The time he pushed you in a locker and launched it, Yang mentioned, popping a grape into her mouth. I didn't land far from the school, John defended weakly. John, you know, if you ever need help, you can just ask, the pirate said gently. Aw. Nora gets up from the table and presents her diabolical plan with a non-entirely sane grin. We'll break his legs. Not a bad idea, Ruby muttered. Guys, really, it's fine. Besides, it's not like he's only a jerk to me. He's a jerk to everyone, John says. That doesn't make it better, Ruby said, turning away from the scene briefly. Suddenly the laughing grew louder, mixed in with the cries of pain. The group turned back to see the rabbit girl crying out as Cardin tugged on her ears. Atrocious. I can't stand people like him, Pyra growled. He's not the only one, Blake mentioned, staring daggers at the bully. It must be hard to be a faunus, Yang said sympathetically. With that, she had no one made a move to do anything about the situation. Such was the norm of the world, as sad as that was. Hey! Well, almost no one. Cardin, along with his teammates, turned around to see Ruby storming towards them with a vengeance. Let her go, Cardin, Ruby growled. Cardin scoffed and simply pulled the faunus ears tighter. He obviously didn't take her seriously. He got ready to pull again, but stopped when he saw Ruby grab the offending arm's wrist. Cardin paused and stared back at the 15-year-old girl, her giving her his most threatening look. Imagine his surprise when she returned the glare tenfold, not backing down at all. I'll say it again, Ruby hissed. Let her go! Ruby tightened her hold on his wrist. Before I make you. Oh, this girl wanted to play. Cardin flicked his head slightly and his teammates stood by. Cardin intended to intimidate her, but if she was scared of possibly fighting the four older boys, she didn't show it. He was scarier, she thought to herself as she didn't let go of Carden, who hadn't let go of the fondness. Carden eyed the younger girl, calculating. He wasn't intimidated by the cheat even a little bit, especially with the numbers on his side, though he knew he could beat her in a one-on-one. However, Carden eyed the table she had come from to see Yang. He saw that even Blake, whose head was always in the book, was glaring at him. He saw the invincible girl staring him down as well. Nora was giving him a cheerful smile. Wasn't she the girl that used the giant hammer? He just wasn't up for the consequences. For now, let's go, guys, Carden dismissed as he released the girl and walked off. He bumped into Ruby as he passed by her, but she didn't even grunt. She refused to give him the satisfaction. After watching them walk out of the cafeteria, she turned back to the rabbit furnace. "Are you okay?" Ruby asked softly. The older girl looked at her and gave a soft smile. Slowly she got up and made her way out of the cafeteria. Ruby looked ready to follow, but the girl turned back to her and shook her head. "I'm Ruby," Ruby introduced. "Velvet," the fauna said softly before continuing her walk out. Ruby wanted to follow her, but decided to respect the girl's wishes. Slowly she made her way back to her own table. I don't know if that was brave or stupid. It's just the funnest. Isn't she the girl that ran into the assassins in the forest? I think you're right. The words filtered to her ears, but Ruby didn't care. Her mind was still occupied with the sequence of events that just happened. Nice, go in there, Rubes, Yang said joyfully as she pulled her sister into a one-armed hug, stopping bullies whenever she can. All around, she saw approving looks from her friends, even Blake. Only Reese had remained blank as she continued filing her nails. "Why did you do it?" The others turned to look at Blake. "Why help her?" "Because I'm a huntress," she stated, "and I wouldn't have the right to call myself one if I saw injustice in front of me and didn't nothing about it." "Even if she's the faunest?" Blake asked, and there was something in her voice that was low, but Ruby could hear it. What it was, though, she didn't know. What does it matter what she is? Ruby wondered. She's here like the rest of us doing the best she can. In that moment, something changed between Blake and Ruby. Neither of them realized it, but they had come closer, if only slightly. "I still say we break his legs," and with that, the moment passed at Nora's comment, sending the group into a conversation about the pros and cons of breaking Carden's legs or bringing general harm to their fellow freshmen. All the while, only Pyro and Ruby had noticed the departure of a certain blond squire.